August 23rd, and this is The Block on the 24/7 Sports YouTube page. I'm your host, Nick Kosko, today with Carl Reed, my man, and of course, our special guest today, Jonathan Dobbins of lightonsports.com, covering all things HBCUs and, of course, FCS football. Can't forget about those guys. It's still college football. Got a great show for you this afternoon, but first, make sure to like, share, and subscribe the show and the YouTube page as well. Help us keep building up our network and, of course, The Block each and every week. All right, gentlemen, let's get into it first. We're going to start out with Jackson State. Now, Jackson State made headlines last year under Deion Sanders with a great season. Of course, they acquired #1 overall recruit Travis Hunter in the previous recruiting cycle as well. So they've made the most headlines among HBCUs. So we got to start out. Carl, I'll come to you first. Deion Sanders, with what he's been able to do over the last couple of years as a head coach now, going from Pro Football Hall of Famer to outspoken analyst, now that he has been a head coach for the past couple of years at an HBCU making this much progress, I need your first reaction to him and making all this progress going into year 3.
Well, he was the right guy at the right time. HBCU football needed attention. It is an incredible brand of football, but Deion Sanders came in and was an immediate spark and lightning rod to bring exposure to how much talent is at HBCU level. Think about what he's done in terms of trying to get kids involved with the NFL Combine. We now have the HBCU football combine, the national exposure he's gotten. And it also helped the COVID year that the SWAC did play in the spring, so it gave them an opportunity to play on ESPN. I think Deion Sanders has been the guy to lead the HBCU football landscape to the next level. And now there's some other good programs, and we're going to talk about some of those later because we can't forget about some of the things that other guys have done. But nobody has ever been able to bring the attention in the modern era to HBCU football the way that Deion Sanders has.
So Jonathan, I'll come to you next, man. It's interesting because you've been in the coverage of HBCUs for the last couple of years. You're getting into the nitty gritty of all these schools. But I mean, what was your first take on Deion Sanders when he was first hired by the school and where he's been now over the past couple of years?
Yes, it was like the shot heard around the whole world when he decided to take the job at Jackson State. It's changed the landscape of college football forever, and I'm just glad to witness this. He's taken Jackson State to a level that I didn't know was possible. First, like you said, the spring year, all of the HBCU games we saw on national television on ESPN, which was great. And then to follow it up with this first full season to win the SWAC championship, go 11-1, and bring so much attention to HBCUs, and to follow it up again to bring in the #1 recruit in the entire nation, Travis Hunter, and Kevin Coleman, 2 top 100 247 sports recruits from the class of 2022, which is amazing. So I'm just happy to witness what Coach Prime has been able to do at Jackson State.
And speaking of those recruits, Carl, I'll come back to you for this one. Obviously, Travis Hunter was the biggest one, #1 overall recruit, chooses Jackson State over Florida State, which was Deion's alma mater anyway. So let's rewind real quick. What was the impact of a recruitment, or excuse me, of a commitment just like that from Travis Hunter? And now it seems like he could end up being that star of the football team here in 2022.
Well, a lot of people questioned Deion early on. Could he bring that caliber talent into HBCU program like Jackson State? A lot of people felt like he could get the mid-level guys, but when you come out and you sign the #1 player in the country, that makes a huge statement. If you saw the Jackson State spring game like we did, you saw that him use him at corner. They used him at wide receiver. He's the most dynamic football player on the Jackson State roster. He's going to have an incredible freshman campaign. The only thing that I want to know is how much offense is he going to play, because it seems like they want to use him on every down, and he's the most electrifying guy with the ball in his hands. When you think about Kevin Coleman, another top 100 recruit, dynamic kick returner, returned the kickoff in the spring game for a touchdown. Another guy that's box office with the ball in his hands. They went to an air raid offense. Shedeur Sanders at quarterback, Deion's son. I think it's going to just be an exciting time offensively in the SWAC this year for Jackson State.
Could this be something special, Jonathan? I'll come back to you for this one. This trio obviously is the highest profile trio among HBCUs that we've seen in recent memory. Of course, Shedeur Sanders, everyone knows, is Deion's son, top tier quarterback, I should say. Travis Hunter, number one recruit. Kevin Coleman, top recruit as well. So when you look at these three guys, does this start some sort of star movement to HBCUs over the next couple of years among these recruiting cycles?
Yes, I believe so, and we're already seeing it right now with the class of 2023. I've seen several 4- and 5-star players have Jackson State in their top 5, and I believe once they witness how special this trio is this season, that you may see a whole bunch of those players that have them in their top 5 decide to go to Jackson State in December.
Carl, what do you think makes these players more apt to go to these HBCUs? Obviously, it could be their heritage. It could be something as to staying just local here as well. But Deion has done something unimaginable, it seems like, by bringing in, of course, the number one recruit. But what actually leads these guys to choosing, you know what, I don't want to go to Florida State. I don't want to go to Georgia. I'm going to go to Jackson State or some other HBCU over the next couple of years? Is it the coaching? Is it the culture? Or is it a combination of pretty much everything?
It's the leveling of the playing field. If they feel like they can get the same exposure out of Jackson State that they do at a Power 5 school, then you're going to continue to see more guys look at it. Deion Sanders has had his program on ESPN. They had James Houston get drafted by the Detroit Lions this year, and it appears that he's going to make the team, and he's been doing a great job in the preseason. You've had the NFL on campus. His NFL scouts at Jackson State practice every single day. You had the XFL showcase there. So the big thing for those guys is wanting to make sure that they can have the same opportunities there that they had at the Power 5 schools. And so far, Deion has shown that he is able to provide those same opportunities. His other son, Shiloh Sanders, just signed an NIL deal with Porsche. I mean, it doesn't get any bigger than that.
You might as well get a car out of that as well. Also, some notable coaching additions to Deion Sanders' staff include Mike Zimmer, former Minnesota Vikings head coach, and of course, Tim Brewster. So, John, I'll come back to you to wrap this up right here. With these types of coaching additions to a Jackson State, maybe to some other HBCUs. Now, we've seen Eddie George and Hugh Jackson become head coaches at these colleges as well. Is there more of a movement now where these more high-profile coaches are going to start taking these types of jobs rather than somewhere else in the Power 5?
Yes, I believe so. Like you said, with Coach Hugh Jackson at Grambling State, Coach Eddie George at Tennessee State, these are some high-profile names already. And once they see them have success, and we already see Coach Prime have success with HBCUs, it's like a legacy moment because just think, you got to think about it now. You can go to a school that's a HBCU, like, I'll just name it a school, like, say, Alcorn State, or which they already have a great coach. But I'm just naming them just for example. And if you win a SWAC championship there, bring in top recruits, you never know. You might have a statue outside waiting for you when you retire. So instead of going to a Power 5 where they already used to having winning programs, and which HBCUs have had winning programs in the past, but bring it back to what it was in the 70s and 80s. So if you do that, you may have a statue outside once you retire.
Nick, I think one thing we have to look at too, when you talk about, in addition to Deion, guys like Hugh Jackson, who got at Grambling, and guys like Eddie George, I think that is a very viable option for some of the black head coaches who have struggled landing head jobs at the major college and even at the Group of 5 level that haven't gotten opportunities. They can go into the SWAC, they can go into the MEAC, and they can make their career there and play dynamic football and take advantage of the opportunities that their schools are giving them in the HBCU landscape.
Carl, that's a great point right there. Obviously, giving these guys more of a platform to coach as head coaches, run their own program. And of course, maybe there's a rise in these HBCUs. Maybe they go to the FBS level one day, and maybe there's more conference realignment at the lower levels of college football. It remains to be seen, but we move on, and we're going to throw those power rankings back up per Jonathan Dobbins, of course, of lightonsports.com, who was kind enough to join us today. His top 5 HBCUs, and it starts out with Jackson State. So, Jonathan, I'll come to you. And Carl made this point earlier when we were off air, but South Carolina State beat Jackson State last year. But you still have Jackson State as your number 1 HBCU going into 2022. So give us a breakdown of your top 5 this fall.
Yes, starting off is Jackson State, and the main reason why is because of Travis Hunter, the number 1 player in the nation, coming there. You got Kevin Coleman, and so many transfers from Power 5 schools have also.
We're having some audio issues right there with our Jonathan Dobbins, our special guest today. So, Carl, I'll come over to you real quick then for these power rankings. Jackson State number 1, Florida A&M number 2, South Carolina State Southern, then North Carolina A&T right there from the Big South. I mean, as everyone sees their 2021 records there. So, to me, Carl, Jackson State is the best team coming back here in 2022, and that obviously has to do with Deion Sanders and the type of players he has acquired through the transfer portal and also through their latest recruiting cycle. So, but give me your quick breakdown as to why Jackson State could be number 1 or maybe even upended by South Carolina State like last year.
Well, Jackson State is the class of HBCUs right now, even though it's going to create some arguments throughout the region. When you look at South Carolina State, who beat and dominated Jackson State in the Celebration Bowl a year ago, led by Shaq Davis, who returned for South Carolina State, they're going to feel like they have a claim to the number 1 spot, but they don't have some of the following and attention that Jackson State has. North Carolina A&T. When I talk North Carolina A&T to some of their alums, to some of their coaches, they feel like they started this HBCU football thing. They feel like they've been the most dominant HBCU program for the last decade, and a lot of North Carolina A&T alums feel disrespected by the love that Jackson State has received. But you also make sure that you don't forget about Florida A&M. Florida A&M, led by former Clemson wide receiver Willie Simmons, he has a great program. He's recruited extremely well. He lost last year to Jackson State in a very close game. So I think it's going to be some competition there, but I do agree with Jonathan and give the slight edge right now to Jackson State.
Looks like we have Jonathan Dobbins back. So, Jonathan, going back to your power rankings, Carl made a good point for Jackson State to be number 1, but don't forget about some of these other teams. So let's go back to your breakdown of your top 5 HBCUs going into 2022.
Yes, like I said before we got broken up. So Travis Hunter coming to Jackson State, that was big, along with Kevin Coleman, 2 top 100 players in the nation for the class of 2022. But also the transfers they brought in, Antonio Doyle, linebacker from Texas A&M. You got a 4-star wide receiver from South Carolina just transferred there, and several others. So I expect them to play at a high level. And the biggest weakness for Jackson State last year was the offensive line, and they picked up several Power 5 transfers for OL, and I believe that's going to really take them over the top this year. And moving on to number 2 on my list is Florida A&M. And some people may wonder why Florida A&M is ahead of South Carolina State. Well, Florida A&M actually beat South Carolina State last year, and they only lost to Jackson State by 1 point. So, and they made the FCS playoff for the first time since 2001. So Coach Willie Simmons has really turned that program around at Florida A&M, and they've brought in some transfers as well. They have I believe a dozen 3- and 4-star former recruits from LPS schools that have transferred there. So expect them to make some noise. And by the way, they do have some new quarterbacks. I don't know who's going to be the quarterback. They're having a competition right now. They have the starter Rashawn McKay already there, along with Jeremy Musa, a transfer from Vanderbilt, and Trey Fisher, the son of Jimbo Fisher, plays for Florida A&M now. So, yes, that's going to be interesting. And moving on to number 3, South Carolina State. I believe they will win a MEAC again this year. Coach Buddy Pugh is one of the most respected coaches in all of college football. And he has several players returning from last year, so I expect them to be in the Celebration Bowl again. And Southern, you probably look at the record and say 4-7. Why are they number 4? Well, if you didn't know, Prairie View was in the SWAC championship last year, and their coach Eric Dooley, has taken a job at Southern, and he brought along with him some players, just like how Lincoln Riley took all of his players to USC. Well, he has one of the best players in the SWAC, Jason Dumas, defensive lineman, and he's one of the top defensive linemen in the whole entire FCS. And he has several stats. Like I believe right now he's in second place for the most active tackle for loss in the entire D1 FCS. So he's there along with 2020 spring 2021 defensive player of the year for the FCS, Jordan Lewis. And they have several, just like everybody else in that top 5, several Power 5 transfers that came along the way too. So I expect them to make some noise. And actually, at SWAC Media Day, Southern was picked to win the SWAC West. So they're expecting Southern and Jackson State to meet in the SWAC championship this year. And at number 5 is North Carolina A&T. They moved to the Big South Conference from the MEAC after dominating the MEAC for a long time. Like before Jackson State and Coach Prime, North Carolina A&T was the school for HBCU football, and they had several players drafted, defeated some G5 schools, upset them. So I believe they will get back to their winning ways. Last year they had a whole bunch of injuries that caused them to have a down year, but I expect them to win the Big South. And just like Southern, North Carolina A&T is picked to win the Big South this year, and I expect them to make some noise in the FCS playoffs also.
Boy, there's no actual debate between these two guys. Say that in total agreement almost. But man, can I start placing my bets on HBCU football in 2022? I mean, this is going to be a very exciting season based on what I'm hearing right now. So we move on, gentlemen, and I wanted to end today with what the future is with HBCUs against the FBS opponents, because right now we don't see teams like Jackson State, North Carolina A&T. They're not in these Power 5 conferences, and of course with conference realignment, all the rage right now in terms of Big Ten's expanding. SEC's expanding. We don't know what's going to happen with the other 3 as well. Group of 5 schools are getting poached for these new Power 5 conferences. So who knows when FCS schools or HBCUs who are playing in the FCS will get poached by FBS conferences or even the Power 5 conferences. But at least in the interim, Carl, I'll come to you first. Teams like Jackson State, maybe they should play Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Alabama, Georgia to open up the season, or North Carolina A&T. Why not play UNC to open up the year? Do you think there's more of a sense of urgency now for these HBCUs to get scheduled by these Power 5 teams to create more exposure for college football all around in many different areas?
No, I don't, Nick. I've never been in agreement across the board of the FCS schools playing Power 5 schools. I think it's too big of a disparity. Number one, the disparity is in the scholarship limit. You have 85 scholarships at the FBS level, and you have 63 at the FCS level. That is a sizable disadvantage for the FCS schools. And in a lot of instances, that can become a safety issue. I think that FCS schools, they need a TV deal. I think that the HBCU needs a reasonable television rights deal that gives them the exposure that they're looking for. But I do not think that scheduling Alabama and Ole Miss and Mississippi State is the answer for exposure for HBCUs. I don't think that across the board they're prepared scholarship-wise or financially resource-wise to deal with that.
I agree with Carl. I don't think they're ready for that. And actually, I believe if they wanted to play a FBS school, I believe scheduling teams from like the Conference USA or Sun Belt is a better FBS versus FCS matchup for these schools. And I've seen more upsets with that also. So I agree. And I agree with Carl again about the TV deal that the SWAC and MEAC, all of those HBCU conferences need a TV deal. And I hope with all of this exposure that Coach Prime and Hugh Jackson and Coach Eddie George and all of these others have brought, that this will make them more attractive for a big TV deal down the road.
When
we
I
don't know
think
all the
about
nitty
when I
gritties
think
of.
about what the MAC conference did with the MACtion games and what that's done for the league. Now I know that HBCU really doesn't want to move games from Saturday, but the MAC conference did do a great thing for exposure with their league with the MACtion games and the way they scheduled games during the week to get them maximum exposure on ESPN. If we can get ESPN or CBS or one of the networks to come to some type of media deal with the SWAC, with the MEAC conference, or HBCU overall, we can't forget about the CIAA as well, then I think that that's the best way to get them in exposure. And it is a lot of great players and some great teams in those leagues.
Yeah, you just brought up a good point right there, Carl. Now, what I was going to say, we don't know the nitty gritty details of TV contracts and what they're going to be or how they're going to work now in the future with some of these smaller schools in terms of ESPN or some of the other networks. But you just spurred an idea in my head right here, and I'll come back to you real quick. Should there be some kind of showcase? Maybe you put a Jackson State against North Carolina A&T as your de facto game of the week on a certain network. Do you need something like that at the start of the season to really increase its exposure? Maybe it is a situation where you put it on a Thursday or Friday or maybe even a Tuesday night.
Absolutely. I think that that'd be huge. I think another way you can get exposure too is you take the three best HBCU programs and you put them against North Dakota State, Sam Houston State, South Dakota State, Richmond, some of the schools that have been dominating FCS football. And you also televise that and give guys an opportunity for maximum exposure.
Jonathan, I'm assuming you agree on this one as well.
Yes, I agree. Those are two great ideas. And actually, they do have a MEAC versus SWAC challenge that is nationally televised at the beginning of the year, but it will be great to see another matchup maybe with one of the top FCS schools in the country, like Carl said.
Well, we're all about more football around here. I could say that. And week 0 is just around the corner. Just a few days. Week 0 of college football is here in 2022. So that's going to do it for us. For Jonathan Dobbins and Carl Reed, I am Nick Kosko saying so long. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Help us keep building the block here. Once again, you've been watching the block right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Have a great day, everybody.